Welcome to Troweling Down Archaeology for the 21st Century. I'm Gary Byers. Got our resident rock star, Dr. Stephen Collins, with us today. And we are in the TSU Museum of Archaeology and Biblical History here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, our home base. And in our museum, we've got over 500 items displayed, hundreds and hundreds more in storage, and we use that for research and other things. But we got lots of stuff, and if you're ever in Albuquerque, give us a call and come visit and see it. But today we want to show you some things that we have here, and today we're going to talk about weapons. Going to talk about that part of the world, and so we've got 5 or 6 of them here, and these are all offensive weapons that you can really make an impact with. And so, Dr. Stephen Collins, this handle is modern. This blade is not. Tell us about it.
Well, this doesn't look formidable to me.
No, it doesn't.
I think if somebody were coming after you with this weapon, you might chuckle a little bit. It reminds me of that, what was that first Crocodile Dundee movie where the guy pulls a knife on him and then he pulls out his knife, which is about 10 times bigger.
That's right.
And he looks at that and he says, no, this is a knife. Well, it kind of reminds me of this. This doesn't look like something that would frighten anybody off, but there's a reason for this. In the world of ancient weapons and defensive gear like helmets, in that world, there are always the research and development guys, the R&D guys. And so whenever you come out with a better weapon, for example, the first weapon is basically a club, a stone with a hole in it that you can put a stick through. And what do you do with that?
Over the head.
You clonk people over the head with it. So that's a basic good weapon. Okay? Well, about the time, and I'm sure the R&D guys are never in the battle. They're always standing back going, I think we could fix that. So when somebody gets clobbered on the head, what's the response to that? A helmet. Yeah. So if you can get a helmet of some kind, whether it's leather, maybe it's metal, I don't know if that would work, Gary, but you would have some sort of protection, at least, even though it might kind of daze you and give you a headache, it might not kill you, you might be able to kind of fight through. And so the R&D guys are always making something better. Now, when you get a helmet, the research guys and development guys have to come up with something that's going to puncture the helmet. So just think of this, back in the early Bronze Age, now they did have some spears and daggers and things like that made of copper, but that was very expensive stuff. And so a stone called a mace head, a stone with a hole through it and a stick through it, that's a great deal. You just clump people on the head with that. But when they came up with a helmet in the Middle Bronze Age, we come forward a little bit, they had an answer for that. And in the Middle Bronze Age, that was the answer to the helmet. And they say, well, what does this do? Well, you have your shield, or you might have a sword in one hand, and you might learn to fight with both hands, like you trowel. Gary is a famous, when he's on the dig and he's troweling, sometimes he gets this double trowel, a trowel in each hand, this double trowel action going, which is kind of interesting. And he's the only one that I've ever seen do that. But this is kind of like that. Maybe you have another dagger over here, or your shield, which is also can be used as a weapon. But what that's for is getting close enough to put that through a temple. Put that right in the middle of the skull, because it's going to go right through this is going to puncture a good enough, hard enough swing, and you're going to go right through this little thing right here. It's going to go right through the helmet. So this is for puncturing helmets. That's what that dude does. So anyway, It was an answer to the helmet.
Yeah.
But eventually, now they really like, in the Middle Bronze Age, they really liked the battle axe. And there's one called the epsilon axe, or also a version of it called the duckbill axe, because it looks like a duckbill, looks like an epsilon, the Greek letter epsilon. And while I'm saying this, we'll get Danny to go pan over one of the other cases and pick up one of those and look at it, and so they can see it. But let's fast forward from the Middle Bronze Age into the next period, into the Late Bronze Age. So when you get to the Late Bronze Age, the battle axe is kind of still all the rage. The concept of basically having a weapon that is a hacking weapon, not a thrusting weapon. Something like this, which we'll get to later. Now they do have these in the Late Bronze Age. In fact, this is from the latter part of the Late Bronze Age. But this is more of a stabbing weapon. But for the big swords, for the big weapons, they still liked the battle axe concept with a single sharp edge. Now we call that, they probably didn't call it that, but we call it a sickle sword.
Now a sickle is normally used in harvesting grain.
Right.
And you take it like this, a sickle, and this is the sharp edge, and you grab a stalk and you cut it off. I guess I should have done it up here, huh? Grab a stalk and cut it off this way. So that's what a sickle normally does. But this one is not like that. Now this is actually a modern reproduction, and so this is modern bronze. But this, and you feel it. There's no edge here whatsoever, which is what there normally would be on a sickle. But this outside edge, this is sharp even today, and so this was a sickle sword, and so you're not going to hit the guy this way.
You'd hurt him because that's a heavy.
Yeah, it is heavy.
Pretty stout weapon.
In fact, it's a good two-hander. You come at somebody like this with two hands.
But what would happen if you tried to stab somebody with that?
Yeah, you'd get
or to thrust somebody.
At least
it would hurt. You might knock the wind out of them,
Yep.
but it's probably not going to kill them. That's not going to go very far.
Not going to puncture much. But this really would, and it's sort of a cutting and slicing.
Yeah, it's almost like a two-fisted kind of a thing,
Yeah.
where you're coming at people like this, and really you're trying to cut severely into or lop off an arm, or cut their head off, or cut their neck in half, or it's a brutal weapon.
So what time period was this used?
This is the Late Bronze Age. This is the time of Moses and Joshua.
So this is what the sword that they knew.
This is the sword they knew. This was the principal sword every soldier in the Late Bronze Age in the Near East would carry with them.
Now, the Israelites...
And by the way, if you look on Egyptian art, and you look at the weapons they're carrying, if you're in the Late Bronze Age, that's what they've got right here. You'll see them carrying the sickle swords.
And so now the average Israelite marching out of Egypt may not have had one of these. They take whatever they had with them as
Since
weapons.
the Israelites plundered the Egyptians when they came out, probably one of the main things they hauled off was a bunch of weapons they could use.
And certainly after the Red Sea, they might have picked up a few as well.
Yeah, they could have picked up a few around there.
Yeah.
Maybe had to swim a little bit to get to them.
Yeah. So this is that Late Bronze Age sword. As Steve said, we call it a sickle sword or a curved sword, and it was a really formidable weapon. Took it up a notch from the Middle Bronze Age battle axe.
Now we're staying in the Late Bronze Age, but this is the fun one because it has a Bible story that relates directly to it. Now, not to this very one, but to one like it. You can see that's about, now, depending upon how tall you are, your cubit can be a little longer or a little shorter, because a standard cubit is kind of from your fingertips to your elbow. So that's kind of a cubit.
Yeah, cubit's a Latin word for elbow, so it starts at your elbow and then goes up, and it'll be something in the neighborhood of 18 inches.
Let's say 18 inches.
Yeah, that's sort of standard.
Of course, the government cubit
King's always going to have a bigger cubit than
was
everybody
about
else.
20 inches.
Yeah.
So if you had to deliver 10 cubits of cloth, as a tribute. Now, if you were selling 10 cubits of cloth to the guy on the next block, he'd get 10, 18-inch cubits of cloth. But if the king wanted tribute of 10 cubits of cloth, that was going to be 20 inches a cubit.
The royal cubit, every time.
So the king's going to get more out of you no matter what. So anyway.
This is an ancient blade.
This is a real blade.
This blade it's an ancient blade.
This is the late Bronze Age blade. This is the late Bronze Age pommel that goes with this blade. But this is a bone handle put on in modern times. But actually, these little copper rivets do go right through and hold it on to the actual sword, to the actual
Very cool.
blade. So anyway, this, I guess, had disappeared in antiquity, but we put it back on there. And so anyway, this, you might call this a 1 cubit. It's maybe not quite, but it's a 1 cubit sword. We'd really call it a big dagger.
Yeah.
So now there's a story in the book of Judges. Do you remember which one?
Yes. Ehud, the left-handed dagger stabber.
How do we know he was left-handed?
Bible says so.
Oh, okay. Well, you know, I thought it was going to be a trick question.
Oh, no.
Okay, that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, that's it. From the tribe of Benjamin, the left-handed
it did
guys.
say, now when he hid the dagger, we're going to tell the story in a minute, but when he hid the dagger, which thigh did he strap it to?
Well, normally soldiers were right-handed.
Right.
When you were using the weapons right-handed. And so a right-handed soldier puts his sword over on this side, so you're going to reach across. So when you're going through, and of course everybody's wearing a robe, and underneath that robe, they would be checking your left side because they would assume that's where your dagger is. But the tribe of Benjamin had a whole number of trained soldiers.
Lefties.
And they were lefties. And so they would not have, it would be awkward. So theirs was on this side, and apparently that was part of the strategy.
So was Ehud a Benjamite?
Yes.
Wow.
Left-handed.
I know the Benjamites had, the Bible says, the Benjamites had 700
slingers.
600, or was it 6 or 7?
Yeah, 7.
Anyway, a few hundred slingers, left-handed slingers, who could sling at a hair, that means a hair on your head, and not miss.
Yeah.
So there were a bunch of lefties.
Yeah, specially trained, almost like Delta Force, specially trained troops, left-handed.
So Ehud was one of these dudes.
Yeah.
Now, he went after somebody. It says he fashioned, he went and got a really good one. And I don't know, maybe in that day it was like, buying this piece of a weapon and that piece, and kind of put them together, make your own deal. It kind of sounds like that. Maybe he got a blade from one guy, got another guy to make a handle, or maybe he made his own handle, put a pommel on it, assembled it together. Said he fashioned a 1 cubit sword, and he's in the late Bronze Age in the book of Judges. So he takes that 1 cubit sword. Now, he's going after a target. He has an assassination in mind. And who is that?
That's Eglon, the Moabite king, who had come across the river and was there at Jericho in his palace.
And we know that there was what's called the middle building, the late Bronze II building, or whatever it was. There was a building there, and he's coming on over.
So they're gonna frisk him on the left side because most soldiers are right-handed, and so they frisk him. He's clean, have no idea that he's got a weapon over here. And then he says, I've got a message.
Now, doesn't it say that he strapped it to his right thigh?
Yes.
That's how we know he's left-handed.
Yes. Well, it actually says he's left-handed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But I think it also says that he strapped
so.
it to his right thigh.
That's what he would have done.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't have known. And so he insisted that he need to speak to the king alone, a special message, a divine message. And so the king was a little impressed, I got a divine message. So he sent his people out and left Eglon alone with him King Eglon left Ehud alone with him.
Well, for him, that was a mistake.
It was not a good choice.
So Ehud goes in to meet with King Eglon. Now the Bible says very specifically that Eglon was a man of remarkable girth. I think it just says he was just a really big fat guy.
That's what it says.
Really big and fat. And so Ehud, lefty Ehud, reached over, pulled out his 1 cubit sword, it calls it, and he plunged it into Eglon's belly. And the Bible says the blade went in, the handle went in to the fat of Eglon's belly, and he lost his entire sword inside the king's belly.
He couldn't get it out.
Couldn't get it. It just slipped in, and he couldn't get it out, and so he ran out without his sword.
King falls over, belly roll there, and he just can't get it out, so he has to leave without his sword, and which was okay with him because he'd accomplished his job.
Yeah. So anyway, now those were brutal days. It's kind of like the Old West without guns, right? It was a tough time to live, but Eglon found that out. Now we have some other weapons here. This one is we actually broke the little bone handle. We have to get it replaced. But this is modeled after a bronze ceremonial dagger taken from King Tut's tomb.
Yeah.
So you could get, just everyday stuff like this. Buy that at the dime store or wherever, and make a sword out of it. But this one is sort of high fashion. It's made to look good. When you're the king and you have photo ops, and now they didn't do that back then. But you're a public figure. You dress nice. You got the gold, and you got all the jewelry, and you got to carry something fancy. So that's what that's all about. But this one, now we can go coming way forward, and in fact we have one over there, actually on its spike or whatever. What do we call it? It's actually called a pike.
Yeah.
But it's on its shaft, and but this is iron, and of course this is going to be from the Iron Age. So this is an Iron Age. You call this kind of a pike or a javelin. This is from the Roman period, this big one.
So look how tall that is.
So Roman soldiers in a phalanx, as they're marching up 15, 20, 30, shoulder to shoulder and several deep, right? Just a big solid block of men, each with a shield. They could put their body size shields up and stand behind them. The guys in the middle could put their shields over the top. They could literally fortify that entire phalanx with these defensive shields, like armor, and move across the battlefield. And why would you want to do that? Because archers from the opposing army would shoot hundreds of arrows, just hails and clouds of arrows all at one time. Well, you've got callers on the field moving the phalanxes or blowing the trumpets or doing the signaling, and they can tell that phalanx to move to the right, move to the left, 10 steps to the right, 20 steps forward, and they can move them all over the field. The commander can stand up on a high hill, and he can move vocally everybody around. Well, somebody's calling, say, incoming, that sort of thing. And they know that in like 3 seconds, a hail of arrows is going to descend upon them. Maybe hundreds or thousands of arrows. So what does the phalanx do? Those soldiers, highly trained and calmly, raise their shields all around and wait for the volley to go. And then one of the watchers, observers, would say, all clear. 20 steps forward. He could move by the way, and of course the phalanx goes back to the time of Alexander the Great. This is why he was able to just completely overcome the Persian army, which was twice, 3 times as big as his. But he was able to do it because they looked at this thing going, what do you do now? I mean, they're going to march right through us and we can't penetrate them. And on the outside ranks, all the way around. Whether they moved to the left or the right, backwards or forwards, the guys on the outside ranks had these going through their, between the shields. So they could literally just walk any direction, 360, with these things out front. And what do you do? And so a lot of times the opposing army on the field, which is what they were used to, was here's your army over here and there's army over there, and if somebody yells a command and everybody runs together willy-nilly and clashes and does hand-to-hand combat. And how many movies have you seen like that? Right? Everybody just runs together and it's each man for himself. You try to kill as many of the enemy soldiers as you possibly can. Well, the Romans were not that kind of fighters. Now they could. If they had to break ranks and go hand to hand, all the better. This is good. But this is not how they won the Roman Empire. This is not how they annexed. What they did was calmly move across the battlefield. This phalanx going that way and flanking this one going that way. Of course, they got some cavalry riding around as well. And as they move, the other army's trying to figure out, well, what do I do? I can't run up there by myself and beat up on this 100-man phalanx. What am I supposed to do? And so a lot of times the armies would just break and run out of sheer fear. And of course, part of that was too that, of course, the Romans have flaming ballista flying as well. But this is really a big part of it. This is going to be right coming out of every phalanx. You're going to have 100 of these maybe going around the outside, and at one every man. And
from the Roman period to the days of Abraham, archaeology. This is Traveling Down, Archaeology for the 21st Century. Thanks for joining us.